The state of the galaxy during the new Scouring novel Ashes of the Imperium is nothing like we've seen yet in the Warhammer setting. With the Chaos Gods on hiatus, the Warp calmed, and the traitors on the run, the Primarchs of the Loyalist Legions turn on one another as passions rise, arguments get heated, and paranoia overtakes them. Without the Emperor guiding humanity and telling us what to do, the Throne World's leadership is like a deer in the headlights. One Primarch, Roboute Guilliman, takes it upon himself to pull off the biggest jack move power play since the Emperor unified Terra and raised his banners for the first time. Someone had to do it, and with the minds of the brothers divided, it was inevitable. The fact that it was Guilliman is no surprise, as he was ever the most taciturn of his brothers, ever the politician, as much as Dorn is a general, as much as Perturabo is a stratego, and as much as the Lion is a knight, Guilliman is a statesman. In the Scouring so far, with this first book, I can see a future where the Imperium falling apart echoes the dissolution of the brother Primarchs' bonds of loyalty to and faith in one another. So going forward, we'll be talking heavy spoilers for the new Scouring book Ashes of the Imperium as we look at just what Guilliman did in context of the wider narrative. So the book opens up in quite a bleak way, as the Throne World is literally reduced to rubble, ruins, ash over ankle deep, and bodies stacked in piles into the sky. The Throne World is destroyed for all intents and purposes. Humanity is saved, the world was not. Most of the inhabitants are dead. Many untold billions. Nearly everyone that is on Terra is coming from outside, coming to rebuild, reinforce, get supplies and food and water in. But those who were there when the shit was going down are very few and far between. Those that remain are starved, mentally and emotionally broken, having endured things that regular human minds just aren't capable of dealing with. And it is into this stagnant, rotting non-existence that the Ultramarines descend, and they come to Terra just guns blazing, totally fresh troops just chewing through everything that they get their eyes on. Orbital bombardments, drop pods constantly flowing, carpet bombing campaigns, just grinding the last of the fleeing traitors who didn't make it off-world into dust. Immediate, unrelenting retribution. Guilliman shows up playing cleanup after the real heroes of Terra did all the work. Vulcan, the Khan, the Great Angel Sanguinius, and the man the Imperium should all be bowing down to, Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, saved the Throne World from the War Master's assault. They held back the storm while the 13th, the 1st, and the 6th Legions were en route. But the Ultramarines didn't just show up with the big guns and the fresh troops. Guilliman is the greatest logistician that probably ever lived and had the foresight to know that the Throne World needs food, water, medicine, and so much more than just boots on the ground. And though Dorn held the walls, even as they crumbled down around him and under his feet, he fought tooth and nail for every single grain of Terran dust. The people praised Roboute Guilliman when he showed up because he fed them. Terra was immediately wholly dependent on water and food from Macragge, and as long as he kept the sustenance flowing, Guilliman was going to keep the support of those factions on Terra who still held influence. The political landscape had changed dramatically. Many of the longest-standing institutions were no longer functioning or even in existence. But some key players were suddenly aware of one solid fact. The power vacuum was about to be filled, and for the first time in the history of the Imperium, there was an opportunity to get a seat at the table. And this is where Guilliman outplayed his brothers massively. He knew what it took to get a fleet ready and to maintain it. He was looking at the bigger picture. The millions of servitors, mechanicum personnel, Legion serfs, and Imperial Navy dudes it was going to take meant that a lot of moving parts had to come together to get the Legions up and moving at Crusade levels again. And the organizations that those people belonged to finally had some bargaining leverage. Guilliman was the only one that saw this. Vulcan wanted to go kill the enemy, striking while the iron was hot. The Lion and Russ as well, and the Khan. But Dorn was adamant that they go, and do so absolutely immediately. The big council, roundtable sort of meeting finally came, and Guilliman got all his brothers to meet and vote as the one thing they were agreed on was that they must all act with one purpose going forward. and that was a pipe dream that is definitely going to unravel in the future. Guilliman has plans that the Army, the Navy, the Administratum, all the various offices that the High Lords of Terra occupied, had a right to a say. Before, it had ever been the Emperor's word, but with him effectively dead, totally comatose and unspeaking, they had no real leader. So rather than be put permanently under the yoke of the Primarchs, the High Lords threw themselves in with one single Primarch, who they thought they could trust: Guilliman. And the speeches are impassioned and are the stuff of legend themselves. Dorn is obviously emotionally broken by his father's death and also his own decision to place him on the Golden Throne, but he doesn't know it. It's likely he hasn't even bothered to take a moment to check his own emotional state, but he's not as stoic as he usually was. He's actually pissed, like raging pissed. Dorn has, in my opinion, all the best attitudes about this situation. He was the one who was there. He was the one who held the walls, and he is the one who accompanied his father and the angel into hell itself, eventually having to make the most critical decision any human being had ever made: to put his father's body into what is essentially a vampiric black hole device, causing him eternal and infinite torment and suffering, trying to do whatever he could to save humanity. Guilliman, as if anticipating Dorn's righteousness and where he'd be coming from, took advantage of this. When the vote was forced, the alliance that Dorn had built crumbled for the greater good, ostensibly, of unity of purpose. But the High Lords all sided with Guilliman, and they were happy to do so as it meant that they didn't have to be subservient to the Primarchs any longer, but unaware that there was a price and they wouldn't slip their collars entirely. They'd be Guilliman's to call upon whenever he needed them. Still, there was much discussion that the Primarchs were made to make war, not to rule, and being ruled by any one of them would not be much different than being ruled by Horus would have been. So they did what they could to avoid it and knew that if they didn't take their chance to get what power they could when they could get it, they would never get another chance to do so. It was not in the nature of the Primarchs to let something like that happen. Dorn knows Guilliman is in the process of recreating the Imperium, and he knows that he's going to completely redefine Imperial law and the culture of mankind, something for which Dorn has been actually fighting. But after the Council, and after Guilliman basically consolidates power, mostly for himself, as the power ceded to the High Lords was shadow power he was actually wielding, two main things happen as far as the brother Primarchs are concerned. First, Guilliman got the war he wanted, even as he postponed the war his brothers wanted. The invasion of Luna and Mars went into full swing. And second, an unfortunate dynamic between Dorn and his brother Lionel Johnson and Layman Russ develops, and the ever-deceptive and dour Perturabo is ultimately behind it. A situation that really leaves us wondering where it is going to go, as the seeds of mistrust and resentment have been planted. Rogal Dorn saw the truth, and saw it clearly, but missed his window of opportunity. So Guilliman's whole argument that they should let the traitors flee and not pursue them, cutting them down to the last man, was all based on a misconception. He believed that Chaos was fully defeated, that it died with Horus. He believed that the ruinous powers would not ever return because they could not return since they were dead. Dorn knew better. Guilliman mostly just kept tabs with his librarians and psychers, and since they had no connection to the warp any longer, he felt like that was proof. But Dorn went looking for the proof, and it was otherwise. Or rather, he sent Arcamus out into the void of the solar system to learn the truth of it either way. Just a shred of evidence was all Dorn needed, and with it he could present it to the Council as actual evidence could not be ignored. And eventually, after running into Sigismund, and seeing how he's gone all apocalypse now, Arcamus finds his evidence. Evidence he was meant to find, as the word bearers on Neptune's moon, Laomedea, conspired to sacrifice themselves and the moon's inhabitants in a bloody war, sending their souls to the Chaos Gods and restoking the flame so that other Chaos-aligned factions could have access to the warp again. Complete altruism from the sons of Lorgar. Either way, they wanted to get noticed, and Arcamus noticed not only that they were there, but that they were using sorcery. A warp signature was indeed present, something that Dorn knew in his gut, The fact that chaos wasn't defeated and only ebbing at the moment like the tides of an ocean was confirmed. But before we get to Guilliman's ultimate power move and how he took control of the Imperium, let's finish this Laomedean moon plot thread. They do tie together, so bear with me. Dorn goes to his brothers, Lion and Leman, and presents them the evidence that Arcamus acquired. Then he presents them with the idea that if they can prove this firsthand, not just one of them, but all three, with picked feeds and everything, they will be able to sway the High Lords no matter what Guilliman says, as evidence is evidence, and the word of 3 Primarchs as witness is stronger than the word of 1. So the Lion offers his flagship, the Invincible Reason, as it's the fastest vessel they've got for the task. In the time from when Arcamus got his evidence and got it back to Dorn, and the time the Invincible Reason left for Neptune's moon Laomedea, much happened on the little moon. Warsmith Theocon of the Iron Warriors, who we followed from the arrival of the Ultramarines on Terra and their rolling thunder carpet bombing of his guys, all the way through teaming up with word bearers who took him to Laomedea, he was able to get a signal out to Perturabo. And the Lord of Iron came, not only rescuing him, but laying waste to the word bearers and all the regular troops, cultists, other Astartes, and civilians on the moon. The word bearers got their sacrifice. They got to let their blood flow, and so too the powers of the warp with it. Perturabo was completely possessed by that time, and Theocon noticed that it was not the same soul who had led them on Terra, but he had the same fanatical gleam in his eyes as the word-bearer's Primarch Lorgar. Theocon was enslaved once again to the will of someone deluded by the gods of chaos, and he absolutely hated it. And he thought that of all the Primarchs, his own Iron Daddy should have been able to resist the ruinous powers. But just the look in Perturabo's eyes told him all he needed to know. So Dorn, the Lion, and the Wolf King of Fenris all show up and the world is empty. Literally scraped clean. They can all tell that someone has been there, and they can all tell by how absolutely efficient the cleanup was that it was Perturabo rubbing it in their faces. But they don't have the evidence that they needed. And Lion and Leman are both looking at Dorn and shaking their heads at him in disappointment. The trust was lost at that moment. Dorn was right and couldn't prove it, so he lost credibility with his 2 most like-minded brothers, his only real allies. But 2 things were said to Dorn before this tragic revelation that I won't forget. One was that Leman told him that he actually liked him now. He didn't before so much, but he does now. It was one of those heartwarming moments, like when the Praetorian and Valdor had their big bro-off in the end of the death. You knew that Leman Russ meant it, and that it was genuine. The other is that the Lion lets Dorn know that the war was everywhere, not just on Terra. Dorn tried to pull some "you wouldn't know, you weren't there" sort of guilt on Lion, and Lion shut that shit down immediately. He let Dorn know that the 13th Legion would not have been able to make it to Terra without the struggles of the First out in the void, and that fighting was done all across the galaxy to ensure that Rogel and the Fists were able to succeed. Something Rogel had to admit was true, and apologized for. So yeah, I'd say he's a bit shell-shocked, honestly. This sets the stage for quite the dynamic between the Primarchs going forward in the Scouring. Certain bonds of brotherhood are tested, as other bonds of friendship that never existed before are created. It will be quite intriguing to see. So, without the evidence, Dorn, the Lion, and Leman Russ all return to Terra with nothing, and Guilliman begins his campaign to take back Luna and Mars. We don't get to see what happens at Mars in this book, only Luna, but Mars was promised to Russ. And he's like a dog with a bone, not letting go of it. That's one reason why, even though he agreed with Rogel, he didn't care as much, shrugging and just being like, "We'll kill them all. Now, later, doesn't matter. If they run, we'll get to them sooner or later." Because Russ knew he had Mars and it was going to be his honor to retake it, and glory would be heaped upon him. He was ever more practical than his brothers in many ways. But Luna, this is where it all comes down to Guilliman and how he's positioning himself to take over for his father and to be the next emperor. Luna was ultimately heavily fortified. It was intended to be the new throne world in the Empire of Horus, as the Earth was meant to collapse into a black hole of a warp gate, destroying Terra, and Luna would orbit that. Luna was going to be the seat of power of the Imperium. and thus the Luna Wolves, or well, the Sons of Horus, were there in high concentrations. Thousands of legionnaires. Many, many more faux legionnaires in power armor that were just augmented, mutated abominations. There were many titans and other heavy war machines, and Luna was heavily fortified, prepared for a siege. Titus Prado, the Ultramarines' chief librarian, leads the charge, and it is like a mini siege of Terra. Absolutely massive in scale, and it is terrifyingly brutal. The Sons of Horus have quite the anti-air defenses, and we are reminded that even though these guys are on their back foot and fighting to the death for a lost cause, they're still the best of the best. Killers, gangers, murderous Chthonian scum, all. They didn't grow up in Ultramar and have quite a different style to them. An Ultramarines lander with a couple hundred Marines aboard it was just about to disgorge its deadly contents of 13th Legion Astartes onto the battlefield, and the thing got torn in half by a Titan's well-placed shot, straight down the middle, just turned to slag. It was brutal. And the Sons of Horus, the once proud and now disgraced 16th Legion, fought rabidly for every single square inch of ground. The Ultramarines pressed the attack, but at high cost. They got their taste of the Solar War that day on Luna. Alongside them fought a small contingent of Vulcan salamanders and the 9th Legion who had been on Terra during the siege. And Prado notices that the Blood Angels are terrified of something, and they aren't fighting anything like what they used to. They're cautious and aren't engaging in melee, just shooting, even when they'd have the advantage. The Blood Angels just seem changed, and Prado feels like he's witnessing something he shouldn't. Like a once strong man who's been turned into a cripple that is trying to walk again and can't, or something tragic like that. But Prado's orders get updated throughout the battle. That rages on for quite a while. And it is funny how he comes to realize that he's being used and that he's not been told the truth. His ultimate objective was to secure the Black Ships. The Anathema Psychana, the Silent Sisterhood themselves, are the ones pulling the strings, and who have been secretly supporting Guilliman behind the scenes in both his consolidation of power and also in his purging of the Keelerites, who are the fledgling Imperial cult as we know it today. So Prado and his Blue Boys are able to achieve final victory, but not before he has a one-on-one duel with a very consummate, highly decorated warrior of the 16th Legion. And Prado is not the better man. His fighting skills lacking, and he's only fighting for victory. The Son of Horus is fighting for life, to breathe one more breath, to fight one more fight until the curtain falls. He's already a dead man in his own mind, with nothing to lose. And Prado sees the death blow fall, and reflexively he claps his hands together, and the warp that was dormant for so long has returned the tiniest bit to something alive and pulsing with power once again. And his psychic power is unleashed in the reflex motion as he blasts the son of the War Master with a tiny fragment of his former ability, as that is all flowing from the wellspring. But it's enough. Victory is achieved, power is consolidated, and Guilliman holds a Roman-style triumph where he rides on a giant parade float like he's fucking Miss America or some shit. Wave to the crowd, smile, look sharp, make sure everyone sees your laurels. Okay, now give me your best blue steel. He puts on a big show of pomp, but behind the scenes what he's doing is securing the food source for the Golden Throne. He's helping the Sisterhood to keep the Black Fleet rolling and the Black Ships bringing in that resource that the Golden Throne needs to feed upon. Psychers. Guilliman knows the truth. His father's a corpse. The throne is doing all the work, and it hungers ravenously, vampirically, a black hole that infinite energy could be sucked into, but yields none. He knows that even that situation, as unfortunate as it is worsening by the day as the throne continues to fail. And he alone of the Primarchs seems to know the truth of all this, and he's the one the Anathema Psychana approached to broker a deal with. Guilliman is hiding a lot from his brothers, and while they do not know the nature of what he's hiding, they do in fact know he's hiding a lot from them, and is not being transparent at all. They know that he's positioning himself both physically and politically to take over their father's role as the Emperor of Mankind, and that does not set well with any of them. Jagatai Khan, Vulcan, and Russ all seem to consider that all to be just part of the way of the world, the curl of the burl. That Guilliman's going to Guilliman is obvious to them. He's the politician after all. But to Dorn and the Lion, as far as I could tell, Guilliman basically needs to be investigated and is probably going to need to be reined in. Dorn specifically notes that Guilliman is redefining the Lex, the Imperial law itself, to suit his own needs rather than those of the Imperium. And the lords of both the 1st and the 7th Legions agree that is just doubling down on everything that sucked about their father. Dorn fought to preserve a certain set of laws, the Lex, and Guilliman haphazardly redefining them on a whim to suit his political ambitions does not set well with the man who should succeed his father, Rogal Dorn. It's been more than 25 years in the making, and changing the opinion of someone as old as I am is often not easily done. But I have to say that at this point, Rogal Dorn is my favorite non-sanguineous Primarch. I love them all 21 of them, if I'm being honest. They're all very interesting characters. Even Guilliman, who keeps getting more interesting the more books he shows up in and the worse he acts towards others. It's actually fun to read about. But Rogal Dorn is the greatest of the great. Too bad his hard work goes so unrecognized by the masses while they heap praise on his much less capable but much more deceptive brother. I'm sure I'll get a ton of novel-length comments glazing Guilliman and explaining why I'm super wrong and he's Mr. Altruism, etc. I always do. The only Primarch whose fans feel compelled to project and explain away all his tyranny with long diatribes. No, I won't be wasting another minute of my life reading those, so please don't bother. I've read all your Macraggian literature and I refuse to become a Scientologist. Yes, it sounds that ridiculous to me. Too bad it was Alfarius that felt the caress of Storm's teeth instead of Roboute, but that's a topic for another video. Remember, it might be raining toxic sludge on Barbarous right now, but it's always 420 somewhere.